Well, greetings, everybody, and welcome to Duerrisms, the podcast, presented as always by our good friends at Advanced Physical Therapy. I am joined as always by the inimitable Matt Schuckman, your Muddy River Sports editor and man about town at all things.
Something like that.
It's a special week for us with
great.
this super fan shootout coming this week. KHQA, American Family, teaming up to sponsor this along with our friend Dennis Schickadance, who does all of the booking and all of the legwork to make this thing a reality this weekend. We're going to dive into it and talk about the matchups, but I don't want to start with you there.
Oh, okay.
I've got an idea to kind of get the conversation flowing.
All right.
You're you're going to hate it at first because it's kind of fantasy nerdish at first.
But I wouldn't expect anything less from you at times.
I figured it that.
I mean, you are a Sacramento Kings fan.
Oh, God, help
everything's
me.
fantasy in
You
your
can't
world.
use that as an insult anymore. We're 2 games out of second place in the West. You can't insult me with that anymore. So here goes. So in Game of Thrones, if you commit a crime, you will stand trial. You can stand trial for that heinous crime by either trial by combat for yourself, or you can name a champion in your stead to fight for you. If the champion wins, you get off the hook. If you could pick any tri-state sports figure in the history of the tri-states to be your champion, Matt, to save you from perhaps a murder sentence, who would it be? Toughest dude ever.
No question, in my mind.
Okay.
The Rhino. Give me Ron James.
That's a really good one. Not what I was expecting. I thought your dark horse might be Sam Garr.
Oh, okay.
Because, you know.
Sam Garr could throw a punch or two.
Yes, he could. Or I thought maybe you might go with the wrestlers. What would you want in that situation? Would you want one of the big guy wrestlers like John Wise or Tyler Perry? Would you want somebody?
That's a good call.
Would you want somebody like Sam Garr who, you know,
You know what? I might take Owen Uppinghouse right now.
The way he's wrestling, that's not a really bad
Nobody
call.
beats him. You could go Colin. If you're going wrestlers, you go Colin Arch. Nobody beats him.
Well, you know that for a fact,
You know?
unless you know, Ron James picks up Colin Arch and smashes
Think
him.
about it though. You put a Rhino in there. Who's gonna mess with a Rhino? You're gonna get you're gonna get the horn. You're gonna get smacked. I mean, come on. I got to go with my guy Ron James.
Ron James would be one bad dude. And you remember, he was kind of like, if you ever watched the comic book stuff, the Juggernaut. You couldn't stop it.
Well, do you remember James Laurinaitis from Ohio State University?
I do indeed.
The showdown with him and Rhino at Faurot Field when the ground shook because they hit each other so hard.
Those were 2 big, bad men.
So If I needed somebody to win a battle for me,
your champion is Ron James.
My champion is Ron James.
I love it. The pride of Clarence, Missouri himself.
How about you?
I'm probably going to take the easiest answer in the history of answers. Now, I think you expect me to pick Dustin Jacoby, do you not?
I did.
Okay.
Yes.
Which, by the way, we never talk about how freakish an athlete he was.
True.
Dude took up kickboxing out of nowhere and was good at it.
Yeah, no doubt.
I thought about Dustin Jacoby very hard. But then I thought about it and I went, why would you not take the Black Hercules? Why would you not take the jawbreaker himself, Ken Norton, the man who once officially, but 3 times in my book, beat Muhammad Ali?
Okay.
It'd be hard to argue with the pride of Jacksonville, Illinois.
Okay.
That was one bad man.
That was.
Yeah, so obviously 2 pretty good choices there. That'd be a fun fight.
That would be pretty good.
All right, let's get into the Superfan Shootout. Speaking of fun fights, and I don't think you can talk about this without talking about Quincy Notre Dame, South Shelby, right off the bat, the rematch, which is the marquee game in everybody's estimation. Number 1 versus number 3 this week in Missouri.
Right.
We already saw one number 1 team in our area knocked off, a parochial power no less, knocked off in Jacksonville rout. 53-55 last year, if I remember.
55-53. Say the score correctly.
You're right. I have to not
Come
invert
on.
it. Sorry, brother.
That's the newspaper man in me.
55-53. Q&D over South Shelby in Shelbina. Are we going to see another classic?
I think we very well could. Difference is it's at the pit this year.
It is.
It was in Shelbina last year. I'll be anxious to see how South Shelby defends Abby Schreck. And if the other pieces around Abby Schreck make shots like they did the other night against Quincy High School, like we've seen them at times. If Blair Eftink comes out and knocks down her first shot and gets rolling, Katie bar the door. Because they're so good offensively once they get in that groove, but they got to knock down shots from the perimeter. Otherwise, you can just focus all your efforts on Abby.
If I told you that Quincy Notre Dame was going to knock down 12 triples at Blue Devil Gym and win that game, who would that most sound like from a game MO of hitting a dozen triples?
It wouldn't sound like Notre Dame.
No, it would sound like South Shelby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what they do. And I kind of asked that question of Eric Horn this week. I mean, it was like you kind of channeled them for a half second. So both teams are incredibly capable of hitting threes. Perimeter defense, I think, is going to be huge in this, is it not?
No question about it. And it's interesting. It's going to be, okay, obviously, we have an all-stater, the all-time leading scorer in Abby Schreck. You've got Miranda Patterson going to Maryville to play basketball, Division II in the GLVC. Who are the complementary pieces that emerge, that win that game? Because you can sit there and those two could go off.
Absolutely.
And we've seen it from Abby time and time again. You've seen it from Miranda time and time again. Who are the complementary pieces that change that game? Is it going to be a Blair Eftink or a Sage Stratton or maybe an Ari Bueller? Or will it be Belle Roush?
Yeah.
Belle Roush is the one that stands out to me. Is like, she's the X factor in this game.
She goes inside really hard.
Yes.
And I think defensively it's going to be interesting because we know how good Abby's mid-range and long-range game are. This is probably, in Millie Mosey Williams, the best shot blocker in our area right now when you go inside, at least in terms of being able to contest. She doesn't have to do much offensively, and she doesn't. She cleans up trash rebounds and puts them back. She does those things very well. This is going to be an interesting test interior, first of all, in matchups. What's Luke O'Loughlin going to do to guard Abby?
Right.
But also, how do you stop the Miranda Patterson drive and kick action as well, both directions? So I think from a defensive standpoint, that's a really interesting battle.
I have a feeling you're going to see Sage Stratton on Patterson.
Okay.
Maybe QND's best on-ball defender and somebody who's quick enough to take away some of that dribble penetration, possibly. I think that might be the route they go. I'm not sure how South Shelby combats Abby defensively.
No, and nobody has been able to do that. I think it's also interesting that you're going to get a Blair Eftink, probably Kaylee Gaines matchup of two of the best snipers in our area right now when they're both going right. And Kaylee has been incredible the last couple of weeks with what she's done, as has her little sister. So, I mean, we're watching really good, high-level,
no question,
February, March level type girls basketball.
We mentioned that you have number 1 versus number 3. They are 2 of 7 state-ranked teams that are going to be playing at the Pit on Saturday. That tells you the depth of this shootout. This isn't one game you show up for. You show up for all of them.
Well, and I think you could make an argument that maybe right off the bat, we've never had a more entertaining 5 o'clock game on Friday than the potential of Griggsville, Perry, and West Hancock, both going for their 20th win, which I think is a surprise on both fronts.
Well, and West Hancock obviously shoots it extremely well. When they're motoring, they can knock down shot after shot after shot on the perimeter and really spread you out defensively and hurt you. Griggsville Perry has just so many guys that do things well. Last year you had Tate Koonsman who ran that team. This year I know guys like Wyatt Lipcoman have played really well. Myers played really well. You've got guys but they spread it out. I watch your highlights and it's not the same guy every time you show Griggsville Perry.
I think it's interesting how good they've gotten with Dane McAllister kind of taking over and being the middle, allowing Michael Myers to be a 3 rather than having to be a 4 or 5 because he's so good as a shooter. He stretches the floor on you. But again, you start looking at that probably pairs up a Michael Myers with a Gage Scott, who has probably been the quiet, unsung weapon for West Hancock has done this season. So there's a lot of interesting back and forth.
I'll be anxious to see who runs their team better.
That's a really good question.
Because I know in West Hancock's case, Alec Himes has been really good distributing, getting them into their offense. Can Griggsville Perry combat that?
They go through Alec Himes very, very well. And they've got a lot of good depth at West Hancock. And that might be the key in that game is that West Hancock is deeper, at least on paper. But I look forward to that. We're going to get Quincy Notre Dame boys with a couple of good matchups against Payson Seymour, obviously. And then you turn around and you run against Cairo. And I know Cairo was a little disappointing when we were supposed to go over and see them at the North Shelby tournament. Got knocked off. But that's a really good team, too. Two big games for Quincy Notre Dame with two teams with very different styles.
And a very critical weekend for Quincy Notre Dame because as we tape this, we're expecting to see 2 additions to that team this weekend. Where they fit into the rotation, we'll see. Where do they come off the bench? That kind of stuff. But Jake Wallingford, anytime you put a 6'9" kid reinsert him into the lineup, it changes the dynamic entirely. And then Braden Sheffield should be coming in and playing some minutes as well. That's what we've been told. We'll see how things go this weekend. But those additions, change the dynamic of this Quincy Notre Dame team. So these are two very important games for them to figure that out.
Here's the interesting thing, and I don't think Kevin Meyer is getting enough credit for the job he's done, because over the course of the last couple of weeks, that team, as currently constructed, not allowing for the additions to come back, has been very, very cohesive and very, very good. Do you run the risk of a chemistry thing? I mean, I know they play together.
You do, and it doesn't matter. I mean, we could talk how great this is and all this stuff, and it is for those players, but anytime you're bringing two guys in the first week of February and inserting them into the lineup, it changes things. And Jake Wallingford has been there since day one. He's been to every practice. He's been part of it. He still hasn't been on the floor with them. Braden Sheffield obviously came back to the team at Christmas, has now played himself and done the things he's needed to do to get back, basically to earn a jersey back. Okay. How does he fit in? Again, chemistry is critical.
It is.
And to change your chemistry the first weekend of February, we'll see how it goes. It's either going to work really well or it's going to be a disaster. I don't think there's a middle ground here where they just muddle through the last month of the season and into the postseason. They're either going to take off and show people, look, we're a contender in 2A, or it's going to be a disaster. I think it's going to be the better of the two, but you'd never know.
You don't know, and you can't say with any certainty.
No.
That said, I would argue, and it's a weird argument because you never like to argue quality losses, but I thought what they did against Bloomington Central Catholic, as that group right there, I'd go to battle with that group. Would you not, the way they played that game?
No doubt. And you look at what they did. You look at the way they played down at Highland Shootout.
Yeah.
They lost that game, but that was a very competitive game against Highland.
And controversial.
And yes. But still, I mean, you put yourself in position to win. You battled with Bloomington Central Catholic. Every step of the way since they won 3 of 4 at the State Farm Holiday Classic, you've seen them play at a high level. That needs to continue regardless of who's in the lineup. And you've got to, if those guys are jumping into the lineup, you got to make sure they play at everybody else's level as well.
We have Q&D versus Civic Memorial to round out the Friday schedule. Saturday, we bounce back. Not as good a game as it was last year, obviously. We're starting off with Liberty Monroe City.
We might have double overtime this year.
We could.
We could.
We could. We don't know.
We don't know.
And then things get really interesting. West Central coming off a big upset win over Route. And it wasn't just the Zach Evans show. Obviously, Tyson Brown went nuts in that game and had career-high 20. So West Central is good and getting better by the second, not a surprise. Then the Central Southeastern girls versus Alton Marquette, which is a game that Matt Long specifically wanted, specifically asked for. Central Southeastern's playing pretty darn good basketball right now.
Be very leery of them. I know we're sitting here, and Quincy Notre Dame's the #1 team in Class 2A as of this week's rankings. Petersburg Porta is number 2. And then you look down there at number 6 is Central Southeastern. Don't be surprised that when all's said and done, Central Southeastern is battling for a sectional championship, upsetting someone along the way that may be ranked higher. Don't put anything past Matt Long, and he's got him playing extremely well right now.
I don't know that anybody makes better use of 32 minutes than Matt Long, and the way he knows his team and the way he figures out how to get you out of your comfort zone. I think that Alton Marquette game is incredibly interesting.
I don't understand it, to be honest. Somehow, some way, Matt Long's team always dictates tempo.
They do, and when you know
and I don't mean put the ball on the hip and it's going to be a 24, 25-point game. T2 team scoring, it could be in the 40s, it could be, but somehow, some way, whatever the tempo of that game is, Central Southeastern dictates it.
I had a coach who's head of state-ranked team say the exact same thing to me. It's just we let them dictate tempo. We didn't mean to, but somehow they did.
Somehow they do, every single time.
We'll double that up with the Danny Stevens show, Augusta Southeastern versus Steelville, which obviously has some interest and intrigue. And that starts really the rundown of a really good end of the day. Menden Unity girls versus Northeast Cairo, obviously, who didn't have a great performance at North Shelby. I think they were down 30-11 at one point in the first half to South Shelby. But that's a team with a lot of size and a lot of talent. So better than they showed there. The biggie we talked about, Q&D versus South Shelby, and then the Q&D boys versus Cairo. So pretty darn good day. 7 games on Saturday.
Should be a lot of fun. I'll be there for most of them. Obviously, we've got a lot of really good teams playing in this event, which is great. it's a different dynamic than the Quincy shootout. The Quincy
It is.
shootout is made for high-level boys competition at the highest level.
People you're going to talk about seeing decades from now.
Yes. This is a area-centric shootout, but it brings the best area teams around, and you see that with the state rankings. You go up and down the line on that list. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I called this really good dessert to what should be an epic steak and lobster Friday night for you. Moline, Quincy High.
Should be interesting.
If I'm not doing my job if I don't bring you in here and pick your brain a little bit. Second time around.
Yeah.
You know, obviously got to do a better job checking Brock Harding.
Yes.
I can say that. That's not easy.
No, it's not. You know Brock's going to get some.
Okay.
You know, how do you limit? To me, it's not the points. You know, Brock, he's going to score. You know that going in. He's going to score. How do you limit what else he does? The distribution, the way he handles you defensively, the way he challenges guys defensively, the steals, the way he just disrupts a game on the defensive end. How do you limit that? And then how do you limit him getting the ball to other guys in scoring positions? Because that's what he does so well. I mean, you can sit there and talk all day about how he scores. Career scoring leader in Moline history now. But it's how he distributes that really kills you. You've got to take some of that away.
I look at him, and the only other player I can remember that kind of moves like Brock Harding was vintage Joe Chapin. There's just a certain alacrity that you can't quantify for people, and how it's just so sudden.
Yeah.
And
smooth.
And I don't know what you do with that, because it unlocks everything else for what Moline does.
It really does, and you got to get physical with him. That would be my thought on it. Is as physical as he is, you've got to be more physical than him and try to knock him off the ball a little bit. Don't let him get into those spaces where he can make plays.
We're talking guard centric. And I think you've been one of the proponents of Keyshawn Thomas almost from before the Keyshawn Thomas thing started happening. And I would argue the last 3 weeks have been really kind of, hey, we're starting to see the upper end of Keyshawn, and it's going to be pretty good.
It is. We're starting to see some maturity.
Yeah. How big is this week for him? Obviously, battling 6'10", future Iowa Hawkeye in the
I
pace.
think it's really big. He's got to be a presence in there, because you can't let Owen Freeman just dominate the post. You know, and the way Quincy plays defense, Owen Freeman kind of gets pushed to the high post and then to the basket, but they got off to such a good start at Moline with getting him the ball inside. That cannot happen. You've got to be physical with him. You've got to push him off the block. And then you've got to go at him on the other end, try to get him in foul trouble. And that's where Keyshawn Thomas is vital. He's got to be physical. He's got to be big. He's got to be able to get the ball and handle the ball. And that means when that ball comes off the rim and he's rebounding, come down with it, collect it, control it, you know. And he's gotten so much better at that. He's got to stay in his head. And I think that's the number one thing for Quincy High this week. They have to stay collected. Moline does a really good job of disrupting your play. We saw it last year with the way they handled Jeremiah Talton, certainly in the game at Quincy where I believe he had 7 points. You saw it in the way they handled Bradley Longcore III at Moline earlier this year. And it's gamesmanship. It's little things. It's a little tug on the jersey, a little tug on the shorts, you know, a little knock in the ribs. You know, all the little things. You're going to the free throw line and they just rub up against you as they're going to get to their spot on the lane. All the little things they can do to disrupt you, they do. They do a really good job of that. Jasper Ogburn is the instigator of that for Moline. He gets in your head defensively. And if you can avoid that, if you can find a way to combat that, you give yourself a chance. But you got to understand they're going to come in here and they're going to do those things. They're going to disrupt you in any way, shape, or form that they can. You have to handle it.
This is the day you're not a sophomore or a junior anymore. You got to be a veteran. So
yes.
I know you don't get to watch a ton of Moline, but I know you follow them as religiously as anybody. Yep. They're playing a better brand of ball than they did the first time around against Quincy High. Are they not?
You could argue they're playing as well as anybody in the state right now. You know, 1 point loss to Chicago Simeon, beat Rolling Meadows, which was top 10 in Class 4. He beat them by 19. I believe it was 19. It was 19 or 17, but it was significant.
Considerable, yes.
Yeah. Moline is playing as well as anyone right now. So you have to know that coming in. And it's not just Brock Harding and Owen Freeman, the two guys going to Iowa. Grant Welch has played really well. Trey Taylor's played really well. Jasper Ogburn's played really well. I mean, right now they're rolling. You got to find a way to use Blue Devil Gym, the crowd, because the crowd I think is going to be electric and huge. We've seen really, really good crowds this year.
We have.
Now it's the marquee game of the season. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a complete sellout.
The whole season is not on the line, however, regardless of what happens on Friday. So as somebody who has seen every single Blue Devil game there is to see at home and followed on the road probably as well as anybody, what is the key to the end game for Quincy High to get where they want to be, to get past the Elite Eight, obviously, because last year that's where the bar was set?
This game sets them up for that.
Okay.
Because this is the game where you figure out, can you handle the pressure? Can you handle somebody getting in your shorts and disrupting you? Can you handle the magnitude of the moment? Can you raise your game to that level? And there are times Quincy High has done that in the past. That's how they got to the Super Sectional last year. They struggled shooting the ball in that game, specifically in the second half, specifically even more in the fourth quarter, which is why they didn't win that game against Romeoville. Bolingbrook. Mine went blank there for a minute.
Hey, I've done that too. It's been a long week, guys.
But, you have to elevate your game. You have to prove you can beat one of these teams. Even if you don't win this game, you have to give them your best effort possible. I don't think Moline saw Quincy's best effort at Wharton Fieldhouse on December 16th. Quincy has to give its best effort right now. And so this group of guys proves to themselves, we can play and we can beat a team of this caliber. Because you're going to run into teams of really high caliber once you get into the sectional.
Well, and this is your sectional level, yeah.
And Moline is in the sectional.
Right.
The sectional will be played at Wharton Fieldhouse.
Which is a huge, gigantic, seismic advantage.
It is. So how do you combat that? Well, you prove that you can walk in there and show them, well, we can come in here and beat you. We took care, whether they win or lose on Friday night, it's got to be a tight game. It's got to be close. It's got to have Moline thinking, Quincy's not going to lay down for us.
We are on the cusp of wrestling this week. Regional start in Illinois. You and I talked that we would talk wrestling this weekend. You and I came up with a plan.
Yes, we
did.
To
do our own wrestling fantasy draft.
Okay.
So here's kind of what we had put our heads together and decided. We're each going to pick 5 wrestlers.
5.
Any wrestling class, weight class is open.
Yes.
The entire KHQA viewership is open. At the end of this, we can actually score this because if you take a state championship, we're going to give you 1 point.
Okay.
So low score is going to win. You finish second on the podium, you get 2 points. If you don't make it to state, to penalize you, we're going to give you 12 points.
Okay.
So Matt and I are going to come up with 5 guys that we want to represent us. Now, because it's also, Matt was gracious with this, because it's also like Abby Schreck times 2 in terms of one wrestler out there being automatic. I get to pick first this time around.
You do.
And then we're going to snake it because you're going to come back and pick first in the next round, just to kind of balance the Colin Arch effect.
Yeah. If you don't take Colin Arch with
you
the
should
number 1
slap
pick,
me first of all.
Well, it's kind of like when we did the
or
girls.
hug me. What are the two?
When we did the girls basketball fantasy draft, if I don't take Abby Schreck with the number 1 pick, something's very, very wrong.
Very wrong indeed. So I'm going to go with the automatic pick and try to get my point because for the last 3 years, Colin Arch has been an automatic point at 150 pounds.
He only has a career record of 150-1.
Yeah. And the one loss is to a guy who's going to be a superstar at Mizzou.
Yes.
Maybe from the jump. So that's pretty heady stuff.
And it was a 3-2 loss
Yeah.
to a guy in a higher division, higher classification in Missouri, who's also a Division I wrestler. And,
yes, going to Mizzou, and again,
it's no disrespect.
There's
with that
no
loss.
disrespect at all. And, quite frankly, again, I think Colin Arch is the automatic pick at number 1, which puts you in a really interesting position because you have the next 2 picks.
It does, and we've got some returning state qualifiers.
We do.
In our area. We've got guys who have been on the podium at
do.
the state tournament. I'm going with a guy with my first pick who has not been on the podium, who has not wrestled at the state tournament, but I think will be on the podium at the end in a couple weeks.
Has he lost a match this year?
He has not.
Oh, interesting.
36-0 is his current record, and that would be at the 160-pound weight class from Quincy High School, Owen Uppinghouse.
I think after last weekend, that's really
He's
good.
been so good.
But again, as we touched on, the only question mark with Owen is once you get there in 3A, it is a whole different animal. And he touched on it, that there were guys on the podium last year that he didn't think should have been there. If he'd have been healthy, probably wouldn't have been there.
Right.
I think this revenge tour is going to be really fun
and he has
for him.
something, and he and I talked about it. He has something he wants to prove. Because I think there's still some skepticism out there of how good he is. And he wants to blow up the bracket.
Well, good for him.
When he said it that way, I was just like, I like the way you're thinking. I like the way you're going about your business. Another kid, I like the way he goes about his business. It's from the other side of the river.
Okay.
And that would be Cody Culp of Hannibal. Not only is he a heck of a wrestler, loves to hunt and fish, and he is the Hannibal Junior Class Student of the Month.
I saw that on their bulletin.
So yes.
And with the last name Culp, you know he can wrestle a little bit.
No doubt about it.
I think those are two incredibly interesting picks. I am going to go a little bit outside your readership, but I have to here because
I understand.
The other guy that seems to me like the best bet, if you're putting money on somebody, is Seth Hayskamp at Centralia, who last year undefeated the entire season, goes to the state championship match and loses a decision there, which, you know, Seffi hadn't done the entire year. And by the way, if I don't take Seth Hayskamp, I don't want Kathy Hayskamp mad at me. Because I love her, and also I don't want her mad at me. But I mean, he's, you know, at this point, I think, you know, if not Cullen Arch.
I apologize, Seth. I've never seen you wrestle.
Yeah. If not Cullen Arch, I think Seth Hayskamp is probably the next best bet to win a state championship. And obviously, that Centralia program is loaded from top to bottom in the gills. So we know how good that is.
Right.
My pick then.
Yes. Round three.
Round three here. I'm going to go with the hot hand. I mean, and I think I have a little bit of leeway with risk, and there are a lot of really good guys that I can leave on the table. And you're probably going to make me pay for one of these, I'm sure, waiting here. But after the Quincy High Invitational and his struggles there, we've seen Ethan Ladd go to a different level. I think much like Owen Uppinghouse, this is a young man who is a different level of motivated right now. And I know I'm leaving you a couple of good Macomb wrestlers by opening this door up right there. I'm going to go with Ethan Ladd and just kind of bet on where he is, the motivation level, and the momentum of coming off his 100th career victory.
You just don't want Luke Ladd mad at you.
Well, I don't want Luke Ladd mad at me either, but I'm more afraid of Kathy.
That's a good, solid pick.
Yes.
And I was wondering where you were going to go with that third pick.
Okay.
I knew where you were going 1 and 2.
Yeah.
After knowing what my picks were going to be. I knew where you were going 1 and 2. So then I was thinking, okay, where would he go next? I thought Ethan Ladd might fall to 4 or 5.
Okay.
As we went through
And
this.
you could make an argument that reasonably he could, because there are some guys really good on the board right now.
I am going to stick with a Macomb guy.
Okay.
I'm going Max Reiner.
Yeah, that would be the other one.
Yeah, 195-pounder who I just look at him.
Yeah.
You know, he walks on the mat, you just know he's going to be a beast. Yeah. Was a heck of a running back for the football team. I just think he's, again, another guy with something to prove.
He's somebody who figures it out. I mean, Luke Ladd was telling the story, there are moves that, you know, they'll call for it. He'll look at him and go, I don't know that move, and just continue to wrestle and win. You know, Max is a super competitor, and I think that's a really solid pick. And you get another pick on top of that now.
And I'm going back to the other side of the river.
Okay.
I'm going another Hannibal wrestler.
Okay.
Going Tristan Essig.
I really like Tristan Essig.
113 pounds.
Yeah, I thought if he fell to 5, he was going to be my guy.
Okay.
And I think there's a lot of momentum for what Tristan Essig has done. I know there have been some losses.
Yeah.
But he's one of those guys where when you know about the Hannibal story, those guys that rise when districts come.
No question.
Tristan is set up incredibly well. Super talented, and I think some of those losses have made him better.
And he has the experience of being there, too.
Yeah, he does, which on top of everything else. And
know.
he's got people gunning for him every match at this point. So I'm going to go Fort Madison back-to-back here.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to, you know, because, and I don't know, because if you're doing this statistically from our area, with my last 2 picks, if you're doing it that way, Iowa is the toughest place to win from the 3 states that we cover.
Okay.
Toughest place to win a state championship. I don't think we've had one since Ryan Hellenthal at Keokuk, and that's going back a time. But I do love Isaac Thatcher, and I do love Teague Smith, and I couldn't pick between them. And because of the way this fell, and those are 2 guys I know that you got a chance to see at the Quincy High season opener, who are both incredibly talented. Right now, nobody. I mean, you want to talk about the way people wrestle. You know, I don't care what the wins and losses are, which are considerable for Ike, by the way, but I don't think there's anybody who feels as dominant in the way they're executing right now as Isaac Thatcher. And I know there's some injury risk with Teague because he's been a little banged up down the stretch, but Dad's the coach. He's got to figure it out. And if you watched him play football, the volition is totally there, which leaves the last pick to you, which I'm totally interested in. Okay. Because I think there's a couple of ways you could go. And I know there's a kid who you super like just in terms of the way he approaches things. And I'm betting he's the guy.
I'm thinking you're right in that regard. There's a couple different guys I'm debating. Like I debated as I sat down and prepared for this. At least I had time to prepare for this. When we did the fantasy basketball draft, you threw it at me as I walked in, and you had you had the upper hand.
Advantage.
At least I had some time to think through this.
Yes.
But the guy I'm going with made amends at the Western Big Six Conference Championships.
Did he ever?
By beating two guys he had lost to last year. And it made a statement that he has the right frame of mind, and he wants to be on that podium. Like, maybe more so than any kid I've been around. Like, he wants that to be there. And that's Briar Newbold.
Yeah.
I just, something tells me, even as tough as it's going to get in the postseason, he's going to find a way.
There's also a small part of me that thought just maybe that you would take Briar maybe one spot up and maybe go with Todd just based on the fact that there's your third Quincy High wrestler, and heavyweight guys, when you start getting to this level, you and I talked about it specifically at the Western Big Six, there is nothing forced with Todd for a freshman, which surprises me how much restraint he has.
And how patient he is.
He is.
Like, okay, I'll make my move, but I'll wait for it to set up, and he waits, and he sets himself up for success. The one reason I'm waiting on Todd is physical maturity, physical strength. As big as he is, as strong as he is, as much experience as he's gotten as a freshman, he's going to run into somebody somewhere along the way at that weight class who's a senior who is just physically a beast.
Yeah.
Can he handle that? We'll see. I got a feeling in the next 3 years we're going to be going, Todd Smith might be our number one pick.
I think, there's a lot of
I think there's a
momentum
chance for that.
Yeah.
The other one I debated was Connor Griffin.
I think here's the problem with Connor Griffin. Just because those weight classes are so hard there.
You're right.
But based on what we saw last week at Quincy Notre Dame, Connor Griffin has a really good shot to make a splash. I think he's a guy who'll get to a podium. I think he has that chance. Can he win a state championship? That's where it gets dicey with him.
The other guy I want to see what he does, we saw him get to the finals of the QND Invitational, is Quincy Notre Dame's Ryan Darnell.
He's interesting.
He's in a tough weight class.
I know that 132 is an incredibly hard weight class.
Yes.
But Brady Lair is so much fun to watch. I mean, you saw the leg cradle last week.
Yes, I did.
And the meme, oh my man, that kid.
That just made your day.
There is another one of those kids like Todd, who I think that the future is incredibly bright for as well.
I would agree.
And, we've seen some young kids in Northeast Missouri. The Palmyra program's starting to spike in some interesting places.
I'll be curious what a couple of those young kids do. A Luke Lawson. A Braden Pillars.
Yes.
What are they going to do in the postseason? I think there's a lot of hope there.
I think we have a really good wrestler, and we didn't even mention Carter Hogue, who, by the way, has been incredible for Macomb as well. So I think there's a really interesting. I know we're going to be basketball-centric this weekend. Do not lose sight of the wrestling this weekend.
Wrestling regional, Class 1A is at Macomb.
Yes.
Class 3A involving Quincy High School is at Alton.
Yeah. By the way, fingers crossed that we get a long wrestling season, because I think we have a chance to really.
Missouri, no wrestling this week because the districts are the following week.
Yeah, and there's only one round postseason.
They go districts then to state.
Right into state. So it's a little different, little staggered. By the way, we did that really quick.
We did.
Well, see, this time I didn't try to spring the surprise on you.
That one wouldn't have been but I would have been able to handle the surprise on that one, because I've been covering it recently. The basketball one was so widespread, I didn't want to forget anybody.
Yeah, well, and that's nearly part of it at that point.
Yeah.
All right, so before we wrap up here, anything our Muddy River viewers can expect here?
Starting this weekend, it'll be on Saturday. The column will run on Friday. The series will start on Saturday. This is my 25th season covering Quincy High basketball. So I came back here in 1999, started that season. The 98-99 season was my first season. So this is year number 25 of covering the Blue Devils. So I sat down and made a list of my 25 favorite games in 25 years.
And as I discovered by accident today, that's just outside the Tyler Tomlinson shot era.
I did not cover the Tyler Tomlinson shot.
I didn't realize that today. Yes.
That was a month before I started on the beat.
Hard to believe it's been that long, isn't it?
It had. It was funny. I messaged a former player who will be on the list to talk about a game he was involved in, and he said, "Has it really been that long?" Yes, it has.
Well, and this man, when it comes to Blue Devil basketball, has a mind like a steel trap because the minutia of plays and setup plays, because Matt and I were, before we did this, we're sitting and talking, and he was talking the game like it was going on and unfolding before him. So the man remembers a lot.
I can still see a lot of it.
I'm sure you can.
That was the fun part is when I did my list, I didn't do my list of, okay, let's go through each season. Let's go down the scores. Okay, let's use that game because it went over. You pulled
25 off the top of your head.
I did it off the top of my head.
Here's the other thing.
Because I didn't want this to be, these are the 25 best games of this, because that, yes, it opens up to debate and stuff. I wanted this to be the 25 games I most remember of 25 seasons on the beat.
I thought it was really impressive just when you started ticking off, and I'm not going to spoil any of the surprises, but I thought the range of games and players that you mentioned was really considerable because people think, obviously you start thinking, okay, biggest names of the last 25 years, and you play it that way.
Yeah.
But you don't realize there were guys who had moments that might not have been, the signature player for a signature year on that team, but there were guys who had moments, and when you go out and went, I totally forgot about that game.
Yeah.
I totally forgot. And there were games I completely didn't remember at all.
And there are certain ones where it's one play right at the end made that so memorable. But the game had to be good to get to that point.
Right.
And those type of things and the reaction and the behind the scenes stuff. I was telling you a story that, one of the games I'll have on there is a player who got ridiculed by his opponent, and then went out and had a career night. Basically shoved it in their eye.
Yeah.
And it was like that. I remembered that. I remembered guys playing when they were ill or injured, the last second shots, the circumstances leading up to a game of what made that game important.
Well, and I think that's the thing that I'm not here blowing you sunshine, but I think that's the one thing that you've always done is you're a master of backstory. I mean, and you've always known exactly what the motivation is, even if it's something small or off everybody else's radar. That's the stuff you find.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Is anybody who sat in that gym and watched that game knows what the final score was, knows who scored the most points, especially if it's on the board. What don't they know? When they pick up the paper the next day, for so many years, now it's when they log on and read the Muddy River Sports Story. What didn't they see that I can tell them about? What didn't they know that I can tell them about? That's my goal. That's my goal.
Where I thought you did that incredibly well this week was with the brouhaha with the Quincy High girls and Blue Devil Gym. And I thought letting the girls tell their own story was a masterstroke on your part.
I mean, you know what? There was so much reaction to the school board story, which just none of us knew that was happening.
Right.
Mike Dade got up and spoke at the school board. And there was so much reaction from people from far and wide, people that don't even live in Quincy, chiming in and not knowing what was going on in some instances. And I thought, you know what? If the girls want to have their say, I'm going to give them their opportunity. So I went out to practice, gave them their opportunity. And they took it, and we had great the conversations that took place off interview, once the tape recorder and video camera were put away, those conversations were just as meaningful because they went on and expounded on some of their thoughts and stuff. Fantastic crowd at Blue Devil Gym Tuesday night for the girls game.
Yes, there was.
Does that mean it would be that way every single night? No. Does it mean they want to play there every single night? No. They like the intimacy of the Quincy High Gym. It gets loud in there when there's a good crowd in there. And you know what? They had their say. Will that sway the parents' reaction or the school board's reaction or administrative reaction? I don't know. But they had their say. They said what they liked and didn't like about all these different things. They were part of the conversation. They weren't left out of the conversation. That was my intent.
Matt Schuckman, we've got one more of these to do when we get to the throes of postseason, which literally is right over the ridge right there.
Crazy, isn't it?
It has gone by incredibly fast. Again, as always, I thank you for taking the time with us.
Been a blast, as always.
Look forward to reading your stuff on Friday night. Look forward to having you in the gym on Saturday, because you and I mean, it's more than just a shootout. It's a summit. The number of people that we don't get to see all the time that we'll talk to over the course.
Oh, it'll be.
You think Reno Pinkston will show up?
I got a feeling he might be there for a game or two.
His lovely sainted wife.
I had so much fun talking to them at
they are a blast.
At the Quincy shootout. I really hope they're there this weekend.
I hope so too. We hope to see you, Reno. That's going to wrap it up for, again, this edition of Duerrisms, the podcast. We'll have one more for the basketball season. Again, our thanks to the good folks at Advanced Physical Therapy who support. This wouldn't happen. We wouldn't have this opportunity. Nope. We couldn't sit around and just have fun and throw out ridiculous ideas, which we do a lot of. But we enjoy it.
Let's go Rhino.
Rhino versus Ken Norton. Oh, my.
Wow.
Again, guys, thanks again for joining us. We'll be right back here in 2 weeks. We'll see you then, everybody.